Good to be here on Sunday morning. It's just, I was just talking to Carol, and we were just saying like how lucky we are to be here. And one of the things, and I didn't get to say hi to everyone. Hi, Beth. Hi, everybody. One of the things that I brought today was this little scrapbook that when we first started, it was in January 2013. And one of the founding members who moved out to Elgin, she created this scrapbook for us to, like, every week we could just write something in. And I just thought, oh my gosh, it's so sweet that, remember that we started, we continue to draw artists, because we are all artists, and that we have this scrapbook of our memories. And you can see where it kind of like fades off and people just start writing weird things. And anyhow. Within each of us is this creative desire that's seeking to be witnessed and recognized and expressed. That's the truth. And within each of us, there also exists this fear that prevents us from being witnessed and, seen and expressed. So we have this weird ebb and flow that goes on every single day, almost every single minute. That's like, I want, I desire, I'm afraid. I want, I desire, I'm afraid. And we get to just notice that, because once we notice that, we get to, heal it. We get to heal the idea that we're not creative beings. So, my glasses on today. The Art of Living was today's talk title. And living in love instead of fear is based on the belief that everything is everything and everything is love. And there's nothing to fear in love. That everything is everything and everything is love. And A Course in Miracles tells us that love creates. And in fact, we are each creative beings created by a creative source for the purpose of creativity. Like, that's what we are. And so creativity is this very generous experience, this very expansive experience. And even when I say these things to you, like, there's a little flicker fire within you that's like, yeah, that's true. Like, I remember that's true, Just even having the conversation stirs up the memory. And that's fantastic for us to remember that we are each creative beings created by a creative source to create. It's pretty simple. This is love, and recognizing this truth is the very first step that we have to take in order to live a life in love, the art of living in love, to be able to experience that. And it's funny because we all have the knowing that that's true, but most of us spend a great deal of time defending the illusion that I'm not creative. I'm not creative. I'm not creative. I'm not creative. We do that all the time, I'm not looking right at you, but yeah, I have heard that from your mouth hole. I'm going to actually use this thing. Thanks. Thanks, Will. I was thinking that I was going to be able to do it, but I can't. So, anyhow. So, yeah, we have this monologue that goes on that says, I'm not creative. And where we learn this, I don't know, and it doesn't even really matter, but it is our job to debunk it. It's just, we give ourselves permission to go about the world with this heresy. I'm just not creative. And, the next time that you hear yourself saying that, I might invite you to say, what do I get out of claiming that? What do I get out of claiming I'm not creative? Like, how does that serve me? How does that serve my fellow man? How does that serve God? The ego says and loves to say that you're limited, that you're broken, that you're not ready. The ego is quite convincing of this story. And it causes a lot of us to just fold before we even start. The ego bristles at the mere idea of creativity, because fear is not only not creative, but it's literally the block to creativity. It's the block to love. If love is creative, then fear is, it's stagnant. So you're a creative being, you're here to create. You were created good, beautiful, and holy to create the good, the beautiful, and holy. And you're literally like the sun, the rays of the sun. You're an extension of God, as your creations are an extension of you. So this is, when you get to create, you're literally giving God the opportunity to create through you and extend itself out into the world. So that's kind of cool. Like when Kathy sings, it's just like, you can tell that she's allowed this magnificence. If you witness anyone in their brilliance, you're witnessing God. God's the author to all that is good and beautiful and holy. And we're literally just like channels or paintbrushes or, choreographers that allow this to move through us. And in that way, it's like, how could we say that we're not creative? You know, we're literally blocking greater good to have its way in the world. And any kind of art or song or poetry or thing that has stirred your soul, like imagine being deprived of that. That's a crime that I'm not ready to commit. And I'll do a lot of dirty deeds, but that's just not one of them. So we could say that art and creativity are almost the most beautiful and holy thing that we can do with our lives. And that there's magic, that there's medicine in it, there's community building aspects to this idea of creativity. In fact, I think it's necessary to the well-being of the individual as well as the health and harmony of communities is creativity, you know, that is based on, you know, the idea that we're creative. So it is surprising that when the budget gets low, the first thing to go is the art programs. Like, that's crazy. That, you know, and if it's crazy and we know that to be crazy, then we have to be the ones to say no. There's more than enough time, space, resource, and energy for me to move into my creative being and to value the arts and the artist within me. When I first moved to Chicago, I went down to this place called Hull House. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it was founded by Jane Addams. It's amazing. And this woman came to Chicago. I think she was born in the Chicago area, named Jane Addams. And she started this settlement house called Hull House. And she called other residents to this home, and what they would do is they would help these impoverished communities of immigrants and first-generation folks, and they would help birth the babies, and they would help take care of the children, and they did all of this good work in the world. And it was amazing. It was the biggest nonprofit organization, and the largest nonprofit organization. And at their peak, they had like 13 buildings. They had 50 programs, 40 different locations throughout Chicago, and they were serving 60,000 people a year. That's a lot of good going out into the world. And she was responsible for moving forward like a decent sewer system. She was responsible for bringing in the first playground. She was responsible for creating what we now know as public playgrounds. The first one took place here because of Jane Addams. And she said the reason that she did it was because she saw these young boys and girls, and when they were deprived of a childhood, she watched them grow up in a dim way, and that they would easily reach for crime because it would be the most exciting thing that they were offered. And I thought, God, that's really profound, right? So when I went to the museum, this young guy was giving us, I can't believe I'm at the point in my life where I'm saying this young guy. So sad. Have a moment. And this guy, this student, anyhow, he said, with all of these problems in the community that she was like, you know, single-handedly with this group of people combating, with all of these problems, do you know the first thing that she did was create an art gallery? And he said, why do you think she created an art gallery? That was his first question for us. And I was like, I have no idea. That sounds insane. You know, when people are dying and hurting themselves and abusive and not getting food, like, why would you create an art gallery? And even as an artist, there was a moment within me that was like, yeah, what's the value in that? So I didn't say anything because I didn't have an answer. And but I listened to the other people who were talking, and one of them said, well, maybe it was a place that made them feel safe. You know, maybe this art gallery was a place, somebody else said that there was a common language that they could understand. Even if they couldn't understand the English language, they could understand the common language of art. And it began to make sense to me that, you know, that she brought these people in so that they could have a place to experience and also dabble in their own creative nature. Because back in their own homes, they had what was good and beautiful and holy in some of their neighborhoods. In fact, this one woman, I read this story about this woman who came to Hull House and she saw these beautiful flowers. And she was Italian, and she was like, this must be from Italy. You must have imported these from Italy. And they were like, no, they're from America. They were grown here. And she's like, no, I've never seen anything so beautiful in America. And that's because she lived within this, she never left her neighborhood. She was 10 blocks from a florist. She never left her neighborhood. And in her neighborhood, it was desolate. There was no beauty there. So it was interesting that she didn't imagine that the beauty could be in America because she hasn't shown it. I know sometimes people used to visit me in New Jersey and they'd fly through Newark and they'd be like, oh my God, New Jersey is the armpit of the United States. This is because Newark is a very desolate town, you know, or was. It's changing, and it's just like Chicago, it has more public arts, but if we don't have those sparks of beauty, those places of beauty, we're literally depriving a huge, in the same way that in our poor neighborhoods you don't have grocery stores and feeding the body, like art needs to feed the soul, and art does feed the soul. Before we started, Kathy was showing me her necklace that says feed the soul and feed your mind, and and how do you feed the soul and how do you feed your mind? With art. That's how you do it. And so many of us sometimes have weight issues or eating disorders because our souls aren't being fed, and we're trying to fix it with our bodies. But it's all about the soul. If the soul is well fed and nurtured, every other form takes place perfectly. So you might want to think about that, including that in your eating regimen. Like, how are you feeding your soul, not just your body? I didn't plan to say that, so that wasn't from me. I'm not taking blame or shame for that one. Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting, all the good work that Jane Addams has done for our city, and a lot of us don't know her. And I think that's kind of interesting, that a lot of us don't even know that story about Jane Addams, and that she's right here in our own city, and we don't, and our kids don't know her. So yeah, community and creativity can build trust and build bridges, and it said creativity speaks to our innocence. Like, it speaks to our youngness. And that's a reason too why many of us put it off. Like, to dabble in creativity is something for the kids, but not for the adults. You kind of have to leave that behind when you mature, because that's not, that's not about an adult thing. And that's what's killing us, Pablo Picasso says that every child is an artist. The problem is staying an artist when you grow up. And we kind of leave those toys behind. But those are the very things that we continue to need to reach for. Creativity speaks to our innocence because it connects us to our imagination. And our imagination is what allows us to think outside the box, And we need more people to think outside the box, because the world sometimes gets more and more and more rigid with us. So we have to be willing to be the guy who suggests the thing that breaks and busts open a glass ceiling. And in the same way that we're seeing the world get maybe more and more rigid, we're also seeing, amazing ceilings being busted open. The possibility of having a woman president, is just, on the cusp of the imagination of those who went before us, having an African-American president lived on the cusp of possibility for those who had gone before us. And so in the same way that we're, navigating this love and law situation, there is a lot more creative solutions that are arriving, and in creative solutions, everyone is included. At the Hull House, it was established as a settlement house. And a lot of settlement houses back in the day were based on Christianity. But this was a settlement house that wasn't based on Christianity. It was based on just doing good work in the world and serving others. And it literally said their mission was to provide creative and innovative solutions for the current experiences of first generations, and that everyone was invited, no matter their creed or their color or their shape or their size or their belief, that everybody was invited. And so I kind of like to think like we're a part of that mission, because those are some of the same exact things that we hold true in our own positioning statement. So we live on the shoulders of those ideas and those ideals, and I'm proud of that. I'm really proud of that's a possibility for us. So creative potential is our birthright. It's our birthright. And sure, it can be silenced or supported depending on your childhood or your family or your community or the values that your community place on creativity, but it can never be snuffed out completely. So that's the good news. So even when you've had the thought of I'm not creative, and no matter how long you've created that groove in your psyche, it's still there. It's still within you. And it will show up in other ways. It will show up in other alarm clocks if you don't start to move in and honor it. And it doesn't just show up like the magnificence of Kathy singing or Picasso or Twyla Thorpe. It shows up in the way that Will creates his curriculum for his school kids. Like, that's a creative endeavor. It shows up in the way that Jim McMahon orchestrates his eating program. Like, that's a creative endeavor. It shows up in Keita, the way she designs these flyers for her healing ministry. Like, those are creative endeavors. Creative endeavors support everything. Creativity is the seed of innovation. Creativity is the fodder of problem solving. It's the bones of any good engineer, any good doctor, any good scientist, any good entrepreneur, any writer, any flower arranger, any communicator, any lover. You know, there's the river of creativity flows in all those aspects. And if somebody's good at doing something, it's because they are well rooted to their creativity. You know, it makes us lean in, it makes us stand up, it makes us pay attention. So inspiration and creativity go hand in hand, and in order to inspire, you have to clear a space to receive the inspiration of the one place that inspiration comes, which is God. So you have to clear the space, and in clearing the space, in A Course in Miracles, a lot of times we talk about the clearing of space is the practice of forgiveness. So that really is the foundational thing that we need to use to open up our channel, is to really forgive everything, everyone of everything, self-included. Everyone, everything, self-included. I didn't mean to look right at you, but yeah. So everyone of everything, self-included. So we talk a lot about forgiveness, and Reverend Mark's doing the workshop right now on forgiveness. But the other side of it is what we don't always hear. We think, oh, forgiveness, I gotta forgive, it's so hard. But the reason behind it is because it allows us to create. And creating is like, you know, having sex with the divine. That's what I just said. It came out of my mouth. But that's what it's like. It's like an orgasmic experience, you know? And from these concepts, literally, that come through for us, then we get to birth them out through us, and everything that is divine comes with it, everything necessary to fulfill its purpose. That's the mathematics of God's creativity. When you're aligned with that, I mean, it's immaculate and impeccable what you can deliver to the world. And that's why when somebody says, wow, that was good, I mean, the most intelligent thing to say to that is, God is good. I'm just a channel. You know, you can say it to yourself. You don't have to go around saying that. But I like to remember that. You know, God is here. She's a freak. So one way we can also, God is good. What the hell? Tone it down, sister. One way that we can also open up the channel is through yes and, you know. So we have this one. When I was in this class, this is the idea of how healing creativity can be. Not just for the self-expression, but how it opens up a space of a possible healing for other people. I was teaching this improv class with these little kids, and we were doing improv for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was teaching them yes and. So we're so immersed in a society that negates everything. We've been taught how to negate. No, this is going to happen. No, this is going to happen. No, this is going to happen. My friend Charlene said the other day at Voice Box that she was raised with the sound of, you know, oh my God, someone's dying, something's happening, you know? And so a lot of us can relate to that, you know what I mean? So we have to retrain the mind, and we do that by saying, yes, and you're a purple elephant. We want to say, no, I'm not. No, yes, I am, and I like to poop rainbows, you know? So to yes and it, you know? And it's silly, and it makes us laugh, but like that's moving towards, you know, this opening, this expansive thing. So we're in this class for a while, and I'm teaching them how to use yes and so we can create something together. And one day, this young girl shows up, and she says, I got something to tell the class. And she's like, I'm kind of nervous about it. And I was like, oh, that's cool, don't worry. Well, you know, we can handle anything because we're your friends. And she's like, I want to wait till everyone's here. And I'm like, okay. And we had big kids and little kids, and you know, from 8 to 18. And so finally, all the kids came, and she stood in front of everyone. She was really nervous, and she was like rubbing her hands, and the kids were joking on her, like, don't worry, just say it, it's fine, just say it, it's okay. And she was like, okay, everybody, you have to stop talking, because I need to just take a moment. So sweet how kids like somehow know how to take care of themselves. And then she said, I want you to know that I'm not a boy, I'm not a girl. And I said, okay. And I was like, I am not ready for this. And there were littler kids there, and I saw them kind of look at her like, huh? And we're supposed to say yes and. So, okay. I said, okay. Does that mean that you're a boy? And she said, no. I would just like to be referred to as they. And I was like, okay. And my adult mind is like going a mile a minute, like, oh, I'm going to explain this to these little kids who are here, and, you know, what am I going to say, and how am I going to make this, you know, feel comfortable for everyone, you know? And, but I didn't have to do anything really, because there was this beautiful moment of silence. And this other kid said, I want you to know that I have never met my dad. And we were like, okay. And then this other kid stood up, and they said it with joy, which is really crazy. And she said, I want you to know that I'm bipolar. And I was like, oh no, everything's coming out of the closet too fast for me. Everything's coming out of the closet. And we stood in this circle, and the littlest kid there, who I was kind of concerned about, she looked at the first girl who kicked off the conversation, and she said, her name was Frankie, and I'm not really outing her, but I said to her, the little girl said to her, Frankie, if you're not a girl and you're not a boy, are you still Frankie? And everybody laughed. And then they just went back to improv. And it was like such a great classroom for me, because I got to literally see the things that were preventing them from being creative were all of these stories that they held separate from each other, all of these secrets, Our secrets prevent us from showing up. And our secrets make us think that we're separate and that we're bad, but really the crack is where the light gets in, The crack within us is where the light gets in. And when she said to us, I want to be seen in the light for all that I am, she gave everyone else in the circle permission to go, I need to tell you something. I struggle with the idea that I never met my dad, or I'm bipolar and that means something, It's so funny because the girl who said that she was bipolar, she didn't confess it at all. She was like, I'm bipolar! I was like, wow, You just never see that dancing that way. And I was like, God bless you, you know what I mean? Because I have made stories up about that, but you're showing me that I have made stories up about that. That I knew you as you were in your magnificence before you told me about your brokenness. And wouldn't it be nice if we could see each other that way? To see each other in our magnificence so boldly and so brightly that when you do confess your little warts and riddles that I can say, really? That's so silly. That means nothing. That's not the most important thing about you. Sometimes these little warts and riddles, we put them as priority number one. This is who I am if I were to define myself. And if you went to somebody who loved you and you said, could you tell me the first 100 things you know about me? It wouldn't even be on the freaking list. That wouldn't even make the list. So this is how God sees us, God doesn't see those broken things. Those are just opportunities for us to move into a greater version of ourselves together. So we get to practice that yes and we get to practice it this week. Like, see if you can practice it this week as you move throughout your day. Just see where you're negating. See where you're tearing down. See where you're, meeting creativity with toxicity. What if we were to say, this is really perfect, you are really magnificent, and I love the word magnificent. Try that on for size. So the thing about creativity is also it inspires collaboration. All art is so collaborative, like the singer collaborates with the pianist. I'm always careful when I say that word. The chef collaborates with the farmer, the artist collaborates even with the paint. You got to collaborate with things, We got to move into collaboration, and collaboration is for some of us very, very scary because it's intimate, But collaboration, God loves when we collaborate. I mean, this delights the energy of creativity so much when we bring what we have to the party and we start to collaborate. That's the idea between the loaves and the fishes. It wasn't that like there was no fish and no loaves and all of a sudden fish and loaves just appeared. No, it was like one guy was like, I got a fish. And someone else was like, okay, I got a loaf. And someone else was like, I actually have 2 fish. I've been hiding them, Okay, I got some loaves as well. And this is what happened. In my version of the story anyway. Don't quote me on that. So creativity helps us to see things differently. And it's funny to think of love as this art form, but in fact, it's the most creative thing we can do is to love. It's so generous to love and be creative and to practice it and practice it and practice it, because practice makes perfect. And just like you would practice the piano, and just like you would practice any other art form of painting, being loving is an art form that you can practice. And the more that you practice it, the more of a master you become at it. So these are some of the blocks to that Pam and I are going to be talking about when we teach our class on, and Holly teach our class on the Artist Way. Holly and Pam were supposed to teach it together, and then Holly went and got a damn job. And so I moved in with, it's all perfect. It's a very creative job, and she's going to show up anyhow. And so, but these are some of the blocks in according to the artist way. The block of feeling unsafe. I was once on a set, and I said to the director, what's the most important thing you can do for your actors? And he said, the most important thing I can do is make them feel safe. And I imagine Jane Addams thought the same thing. Like, what's the most important thing I can do for all these people who are just coming so ragged and fearful from a new world with no language and no resources, and they just, before welfare was even in place, what was the most important thing I could do? I could open the door and help them feel safe. You know, so this is true for the artist. You know, when you're not feeling safe, you know, it can really close you off. And that's why, when I kicked off this conversation, that being very aware of who your playmates are is important. Because if you're hanging out with people who are not about your highest good, you need to see what you can do to gently, you know, light and polite and move them to the side. You know, you got your lesson, I want you to graduate. It's time to move on to a playground where there's win-win, where you get in circles like this that are very available to all of us. The feeling of being unsure, the feeling of being incapable, the feeling of being a fake or a fraud. I know many of us come to that like, they'll know I'm a fake or I'm not a real artist. What is a real artist? You know, I made some bread, I created it, that's done, you know? There's nothing fake about that. The feeling of being stuck, the feeling of limited time or resources, the feeling that no one will care about your contributions, the feeling of feeling too thin or too weak or too distracted or too confused to be an artist. These are just lovely little, you know, distractions of the ego. One of my favorite is confused. I like to play confused a lot, but I'm aware of it today. So what I would invite you to do is, in order to expand your relationship with your creative nature, is to move out into the world this week with that yes and exercise, but also to try something new. You know, maybe interview somebody you already know, so that you can see something else about them. Maybe go to a place you've never been. Maybe try on some old clothes in the back of your closet that you're saving for the special day, you know? You know, bring it all out. Do something new, interview someone. Picasso says, I'm always doing that which I cannot do in order that I may learn how to do it. Which is great, isn't it? So you are creative, you are capable, end of story. And this is a gift that's given you by the right of who you are. You know, I'm not giving you the permission. This is who you are. This is the way that you accept this gift is by demonstrating it. By demonstrating I'm a creative being. And as you demonstrate I'm a creative being, it really helps to bring in a very effortless way of being. So like when you're painting or when you're singing, there's this feeling of peace that passeth all understanding, where the words, the symbols, the songs, the tunes, the tone, the inflections, the paint, all of it just seems to be like, you know, so give yourself a little of that. We need more of that. That's like meditative. I want to know in the conversation what you're going, this is a superpower. This is actually a superpower that lives within you. And if you recognize that and accept that, I want to know what you're planning to do with that superpower. I want to know how you're going to activate that superpower this week. And that's the truth and the whole truth. So help me God. Yeah. So what do you think? I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, or you can go ahead and sign up for our newsletter at SpeakEasySpiritualCommunity.com so we can keep the conversation going. Because SpeakEasy is all about engaging in engaging conversations. Everything is better when we all share our voice. I'm Maureen Muldoon, your spiritual vixen, reminding you to love more and fear less, and don't forget to laugh. What do you say?